Still letting people on. How are you all doing from last night? How are we? We get loads of lovely messages, loads of people connecting dots that had never been connected before, which is just brilliant, which is exactly what this training is about. Whether you take the extended training or not, at least you get to this stage in day one and say, okay, you know, I know where I was, I know where my current reality is, and I know where I need to be in order to support myself and support the clients better. If that's the place you've got to, I'm delighted. Anybody, any questions on anything or need anything clarified about last night before we begin? I'm just going to open the chat. If you do, please put it in the chat. Anybody on Facebook, if you have anything, put it in the chat and Leona will relay it to me in message. And I just want to make sure that anything that's sticking or anything that doesn't make sense, that I clarify. The material is too important. So let's do a tiny recap from last night. We talked about the importance of assessments. We talked about the importance of assessments for psychosomatic disunity, for introspection, which is a facet of unity, and metacognition. And we talked about the intricacies of how they come together and allow a capacity within the human condition to understand itself, to be able to self-report, to be able to self-reflect. So that is key for all of us to be able to understand that. We talked a wee bit last night about most of our current realities, most of our current training. We've never been taught this stuff. We've never been taught to specifically work with this stuff. So then, therefore, it's very difficult to get a client to deepen if we haven't done the proprietary work and if the client hasn't done the proprietary work. And what's really difficult, I think, is the desire to do the deeper work. Because there is a real desire, do you see that in your clients? A real desire to do deeper work, a real desire to get beyond the story. They're as frustrated as we are. They're as frustrated as it is for us to know that they're stuck somewhere. So there's this real desire coupled by this real stuckness, coupled by this real capacity issue, but we don't see it as a capacity issue. We read it as all sorts of different things. But what I'm hoping that last night did is it helped you assess whether it is a capacity issue, because at least we can differentiate between a capacity issue and a resistance issue. Sometimes capacity issues are show as resistance, but at least we can differentiate between the two. And that's kind of really what my hope is. Because the work involved in building unity is a few weeks process. There is skill, there is steps involved in building psychosomatic unity. It doesn't happen from nowhere. It doesn't happen out of thin air. There are actually steps and skill required in order to build that psychosomatic unity, in order to build that introspection safely, in order to build that metacognition safely. And what I was saying last night is part of those steps is understanding the wrapping process. How did everybody feel about that? Did that land okay? Did I communicate that effectively? When we talked about wrapping, we moved away into the second principle and we talked about what happens to us, the human condition, why we don't just have one feeling, why we have feelings about our feelings, why we have stories about our feelings. Did that land effectively? And can you see why disunity is a better choice? Can you see why psychosomatic or why introspection becomes a thing that you don't even want to play in? But even at that, the client still has a desire to heal. Why? Because the human condition's designed to actualize. So it is this really difficult position for us as human beings. Do you want to actualize, but do you want to turn away from the pain? And most of us are caught in that place where we're aware of the pain, we're aware that there's something not right, we're aware that we want to do deeper work, but we're incapacitated because of the systems inability, because of a lack of understanding, because of a lack of training, because of a lack of psychoeducation, because of a lack of actual experiential awareness. I've just had a client, Sophie, I've just had a client inquiry where I can see their core feeling is anger and how it's manifesting shame, blame, and guilt. Immediately thought of rapping. Sophie, I love you. Haven't met you. I haven't seen your wee face here, but I love you. That is exactly what this training is for. You do not understand the relief that your client will feel when you can see beyond what is presented. The relief is immense. The system will just open right up. And if you can do some of that work, then what will happen is by default in that unwrapping work, you'll move towards more unity. You'll move towards more, even that understanding, even the reflection of that understanding. Not trying to move the client beyond, past, just being in that. So you can tell I'm really passionate about it. The difference, look, the difference this stuff makes is life changing. And that is not hyperbole. The difference it makes is absolute hyperbole. It's absolute transformational. It's massive. So we did rapping, we did the psychosomatic unity. And okay, so what we're going to do tonight is we're going to revisit rapping, yeah. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get into the details of rapping, and then we're going to look at another concept. Absolutely. When avoidance is a major strategy and it has been used habitually, it's more frightening to go into emotion and psychosomatic unity. And avoidance is because of, and there's the key question. Why avoidance? What is the avoidance? And is the avoidance because of rapping? Because avoidance isn't just for avoidance. And there's Helen, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. When we undo and work with what the detail of the avoidance is, then it's not easy. Like, let's be realistic. There's nobody skips into their heart of their pain even after unwrapping, but it's an easier process. So, okay, so let's look at rapping again. Rapping is, let me just clarify what we talked about. Rapping is the process in which we have a narrative, a story, often incredibly negative, attached to our inner worlds, attached to the emotions that we feel. So rapping is a narrative. Rapping is also a feeling. Rapping is also nervous system activation. Rapping is also a story, a inner we call it inner negative narrative inside the course. So this inner negative emotional story, somatic story that sits around emotion. Now, why and where does that come from? So I want you to start thinking about when you see rapping, and this will be good for you, Sophie. When you see rapping, I want you to start to think about the types of rapping. And we're going to start by looking at the most generic form of rapping. And we call that generalized rapping. Now, generalized rapping, big broad strokes. I want you to think about these three types of rappings as general, specific, and then very, very, very narrow. So it's like a funnel. So when you're thinking about rapping, you're thinking about this generalized rapping. Now, what does generalized rapping mean? You see it everywhere. You see it in different cultures. Anger is evil. It's very, very generalized. Feelings are weak. Big boys don't cry. Girls are dramatic. Do you see the sweeping statements that comes from that? Can any of you think of very generalized stories, narratives, feelings, interpretations of emotions that you've heard down through the ages, that you've heard in your own cultures, in your own families. I mean, the boys, big boys don't cry is a classic one. Yeah. Emotion or sadness is madness. That was a narrative that I heard. Bad we are nerves. Anybody remember that? Bad we are nerves. I used to hear that all the time when I was little. Emotions are dangerous, oversensitive. You're just oversensitive. If you've any emotion, it's just oversensitive. For boys, it's hard, isn't it? It's weakness. It's you're belittled for having emotion. But when we're talking about generalized, we're talking about nearly transgenerational ideas about emotional. We have a wide audience here. We have an audience from America, we have an audience from Ireland, an audience from the UK. Ireland particularly, like I live in Southern Ireland and I'm from Northern Ireland. I grew up in Derry. And the narrative, the predominant narrative was that emotions were a pathology, were a sickness, were an illness, were diseases. That was the general. Now, did anybody ever sit me down and say that to me? No. Did anybody severely interject that onto me? No. That was picked up in the ether just from listening to communication. So there's a lot of generalized view of generalized rapping that we haven't even come to terms with. And only when we're faced with our own internal difficulties does this rapping emerge. Does this voice, does this stuff emerge? Oh, beautiful, typical redhead, stiff upper lip, brilliance. Yeah, I love it. But isn't that incredible? And only until we are asked or forced or made work with it, or if any of your children ever had emotional difficulties and you see how they're treated in school, or you see what the system does, then you start to see this generalized rapping. Does everybody understand? It's so general, so specific. Now so unspecific. It's so unspecific to the person. It's generalized. Now, the problem with generalized rapping is it's so insidious because it's not, it has been passed down from family to family, generation to generation, culture to culture. It just becomes a way of being. Oh yes, Rhonda, don't make a scene. Heaven forbid that you would express your emotion in a way that would make a scene. So I want you to start thinking about this and think about if that is an unconscious process in you. And that unconscious detail sits in an unconscious way. But all you understand is that every time you try to articulate your inner world, you're met with this resistance. But you don't know what that resistance is. You can't articulate that resistance because all of this is unconscious. Our job is to now bring that unconscious material out so we can work with it. The next thing that we're looking at is specific rapping. And that tends to get more specific on emotions. So particular emotions themselves rather than a generalized view. So if we think about it, I said this earlier, the fear of fear. How many of your clients have been afraid of fear? Fear is massive. Anger is evil. Anything else that you can think specifically that you've heard around a specific emotion and what it means? Excitement is loss of control. Do you see, even in some of the good ones, Shame. Billy, say that?
Donna, just when people say like, "Oh, this is silly," you're going to laugh at this, but I feel, and it's like they're ashamed for the feeling. So it's does that make sense? I didn't type it very well.
Yes,
Sorry.
no, that makes sense. Yeah. You will laugh if I give you this particular feeling. You will make little of this feeling if I share it. You will shame it. You will belittle it. There's a narrative around this emotion that I feel and how you will handle that. Absolutely. Yeah. Pride. Pride is you're not allowed to be proud. Pride is a sin. Yeah. You don't want to be, you don't want to get too big for your boots. Not at all, Rhonda. Please don't be happy, abundant, or grateful. And please don't display any of those emotions. Don't display your sadness either, because that might mean madness. Certainly don't display your anger, because that might mean you're crazy. So don't display the high and don't display the low, and just stay somewhere in between, and don't put your head above the parapet. Everybody with me? And then we get into this third type of wrapping. And this third type of wrapping is a much more specific than the other wrapping. And it's what I call experiential wrapping. And it's experiential wrapping where I have had an experience with a very difficult emotion. I have had an experience with humiliation. And this humiliation has rose in me. And because of all the generic wrapping, because of all the specific wrapping, and because of all the lack of co-regulation, I didn't know what to do with this humiliation that rose on me. So as a small 5-year-old girl standing against a blackboard, as the humiliation rises in me, as the shame rises in me, then the only thing that I know how to do is to shut down. My nervous system gets so overwhelmed because there's no regulation. And my nervous system takes me into full amygdala hijack. And in that amygdala hijack, I can't think straight. And in that not thinking straight, I am not able to articulate, and I am frozen. And in that freeze, I assume that I am unlovable, unconnectable to. And that is my experience of humiliation. That is my experience. It's not an experience that has been interjected. It's not an experience that I have been told will happen. It's my experience of humiliation. And now I know humiliation to be unsafe. Humiliation is not safe because I'm powerless in humiliation. I am frozen by humiliation. I am unlovable in humiliation. So humiliation, to share to you, the therapist, will bring all of those risks. It will have the exact same pattern, the exact same experience as it rises in me as I talk to you that it had on that day against the blackboard. That pattern got froze into us, that understanding. That is how humiliation is experienced in the body and perceived by the mind and responded to by the nervous system. It is a sense of overwhelm, a sense of powerlessness, a sense of shame, and a sense of freeze that I do not want to experience again. And nor do I want you to see this in me. I want so much to get rid of the humiliation because it's stopping me from rising. It's stopping me from taking a promotion. It's stopping me from actualizing. But every time I do, I'm pulled back by the weight of what it is, by the memory of the experience of humiliation, which is not introjected, which was experienced. Does that make sense? And so what we find in most human beings is all types of wrapping. It is a reality, unless you've lived in some commune that is, you know, has regulated your every move, that has given you everything you've got. And we're not talking about the most traumatized. We're talking about just the generalized sense of living as children in families, in communities, in organizations. So all of this wrapping becomes an integral part of how we respond, how we feel about our feeling. So when a client says, I'm not going to go there, I won't come back, that's not a flippant remark. Or have you ever heard a client say, it's like a tube of toothpaste, if you squeeze it, it's not going back in? Have you ever thought that yourself? If I touch that, what do you do with it? Now that is just the tip of the iceberg of wrapping. And it's often your first clue, guys, that there is something much deeper, something much more solid, something maybe very experiential wrapping here. There is no way that in the world is that client, no way in the world is that client ever going to be able to embody, if we go back to the first understanding of what it is to heal, there's no way that that client will be able to sit with humiliation without being overly activated, without being overwhelmed, without being ashamed, without having that work done. So when we lead a client towards deepening, I really want you to be so clear about listening for what may sit around it. And it's in the listening, like you did, Sophie, right? Brilliant. It's like, it's the listening for that, the picking up those nuances, and hopefully after tonight saying, are we dealing with specific wrapping, generalized wrapping, or experiential wrapping here? So let me just put this graphic up so you can see it, so that you got it. And is it? Called core wounded wrapping here, but it's experiential wrapping. Everybody see that? Everybody okay with that? Do you see of the guys that are with me? See the guys, I'm just going to turn on a light here. See the guys that are with me that are, let me see. Better. Yeah. The guys that are trained in this, what's your experience of spotting wrapping and unwrapping? What happens for the client? Is anybody willing to share from a client's perspective? So any of the guys that have done this course that are working actually with wrapping and unwrapping, what has been your experience of spotting and unwrapping for the client's process? Anybody want to share? It's not like it's to be quiet.
I can share.
Go ahead, shout.
The quick example that just happened. A client is talking about severe neglect and abuse in the family. And we're just getting to know each other, and she's starting to just kind of share the stories, and we're looking at her reason for coming in. And she starts to talk about how she always had to figure out how to take care of herself. She was on her own. So money became a really important part of her life. And then she immediately says, and I know that's terrible to say, I should be more concerned about love, not money.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay, so there's this shame wrapping that's going to keep us from getting into the real material here. So we stopped and I had her think about how that little one that she's talking about, herself, figured out how to take care of herself. And one of the ways was making her own money.
Wow.
And what did she really think about that now, looking back? And she's like, that's pretty smart. Right. So we just kind of changed the story just a tad bit by giving her a perspective.
Yeah.
And she got a little bit emotional, but just a little, we're just looking for enough relief, right? That we can get in there and talk about the deeper piece. So the shame was in a session, I kind of watched it like, and I kind of kept listening for it. And it was pulled apart enough. So
Right.
that's a quick example.
Brilliant. But there's a brilliant example of an unshaming process, because that's what fundamentally unwrapping is. It's an unshaming of the inner experience process. So beautifully described. Does that make sense to you? So when you're looking at identifying wrapping, you're looking at unwrapping. What does unwrapping mean? Exactly like Armandy's just said. It is identifying it first and then challenging it, because it has been either interjected or it's an experience that they've had because they've had no capacity to help, no capacity to deal with it, no capacity to process it. Their nervous system was too weak because they were 4 or 5 years of age. So what you're doing there in the unwrapping is that you're working at reframing, changing, opening up, unshaming what they actually think and feel about their own inner world. And that creates an automatic next level of awareness. If that is too strong, you're not getting by it. You're going to come up against it. So the process of identifying wrapping is quickly followed by unwrapping, which is about challenge, which is about unshaming, which is about re-experiencing. Does that make sense? So you're identifying wrapping, and then you're challenging, changing, working with, reframing all of the interventions that you already have. Like, you already have these interventions at your hand. The key to this isn't a new intervention. The key to this isn't anything more in terms of skill that you already have. You're spotting wrapping so that you can work with it before you try to move, or before a client tries to deepen beyond it, because it'll stop it. That wrapping will stop any process. It'll stop any unity. It'll stop any. So you're questioning. Yes, Armandy, you're questioning the assumptions that were made. You're questioning the experiences that were had. You're working with them to understand, unshame them, and reframe them. Does that make sense? A lot of my work, as an example, was, as I had said to you last night, I had a lot of wrapping around sadness. I fundamentally believed it was a madness. I genuinely, and I know that might be hard to believe, and it may, you know, from an educated audience, feel like it's ridiculous. But the sense of fear that I had around that, the sense of nervous system activation, that I couldn't touch this nothingness that was in me, because I was absolutely convinced at the age of 24 that this was some sort of illness that I would never get rid of. Did I verbalize that to anybody? No. Why didn't I verbalize that? Because I didn't even know it was happening inside me until I did, and I did my own process. So a lot of our clients aren't able to articulate this because they have never verbalized it. A lot of it's unconscious, and it shows up in resistance. And it's our job to hear the nuances of that wrapping as it's presenting, or check the wrapping. Does that make sense to you? Has anybody any questions about that? So important. Siobhan, yes.
So, as somebody who has who's on the clearing method at the moment, but what strikes me is it's so interesting, my own relationship with my emotions and my understanding of them. So cognitively, I think, yes, I know this, I understand this, I can see an emotion and it being mildly felt or moderately or very strongly. But within the experience of listening to a client or being listened to, there's, when you're embodying the feeling, that's so different. And so there can be assumptions and presumptions, but just, I think there's a chasm there, and it's just interesting to note.
Yes, and what you're saying is the chasm is from intellectualization towards some sort of felt sense, towards the full embodiment. And it's the full embodiment that actually moves you further. But you can't get to that full embodiment unless it's safe to do so.
Yeah, and listening to clients, even my own reactions to their emotion, it plays a part in the communication and the understanding. So if I'm blocked in any way, I think I'm blocking them. But I have found the process so helpful in deepening with clients, and even in approaching it very gently, depending on the client, from a psychotherapeutic way, just like we had tonight, generalized, experiential, and the one in the middle, but specific. But even them seeing it laid out like that, it sort of demystifies it, allows them to bring in their own material, but it definitely, like, significantly brought them to another level. Yeah.
Moves you to the next stage of awareness without pushing. Nearly like there is capacity in this, not nearly, like there's capacity in the system, and then there's movement. And especially because if you think about the other side of it, if you're seeing and witnessing and bearing witness to that is within, that has been unconscious in them, can you see the depth of the process? Can you see the depth of the relationship that evolves and that is evoked from that process? Because you are hearing them with an intricacy that no one else has ever heard them. You're seeing processes in them that has never been seen before, and maybe where they've been blocked 10 times before. So it's where we're seeing huge shifts in the client, and that, again, it's not hyperbole. We're seeing huge shifts because we're spotting these tiny intricacies where the client can't deepen because they're so badly wrapped in the emotion from the specifics in general. And when we work there, and people would often say to me, how long do you have to work there? You work there as long as it takes. You work in unwrapping as long as it takes. And we help educate the client and help them understand. And when I say as long as it takes, I'm talking a few weeks, but it's a few weeks well spent. Because if it's not spent there, it's spent in procrastination, it's spent in DNAs, it's spent in storytelling, it's spent there. Look at the reason why you came to this course in the first place. You came to this course because you understand the frustration for the client to be stuck in process. So if we have to elongate the process by a few extra weeks in order to help them move on, and I know some of these are mandated for 6 sessions, but even if we're doing what we call pre-therapeutic work in 6 sessions, then the next 6 sessions are going to be a lot easier for client and you. And you're not going to get burnt out and exhausted, because how many of us are burnt out? Because we're going round the same. That's just the reality of this. I know it. I talk to therapists every single day. I am one. I know it. I know what it's like for the client to be exhausted, and you get exhausted really easily. It's just the truth of the process. So psychosomatic unity, the components of psychosomatic unity, that is needed. That is a process in and of itself. And then we have this unwrapping. We understand the interconnection between, or do we understand the interconnection between wrapping and psychosomatic unity? Why we can find some foundations for psychosomatic unity, but unwrapping tends to be the kind of the one that breaks it all open, that creates all of the work experientially. And then the third piece of the puzzle is what we call self-soothing. It's really self-regulation. Now, what is the differentiation between self-soothing and wrapping? Wrapping is generally the way that I think and feel about my emotions. And self-soothing is the way I treat myself in these emotions. You see the difference? So wrapping is what I think this emotion will do to me, what I think it will create in me, what I know it does to me, that I know it hurts me, it wounds me, it doesn't serve me, and this is the narrative, and this is the story, and this is the person I become when I feel these feelings. And self-soothing is a different thing. It's how I treat myself when I have these emotions. How do I treat myself? It's two different processes. So how do I treat myself will be a reflection of how you were treated. It's an internalized voice of your caregiver that becomes your own narrative, becomes your own voice. And so you will, and we do, and our clients will have a way that they treat themselves. This is why self-care pushes me over the edge. This is why when people suggest to clients to look after themselves, to care for themselves, there is an incapacity in caring for themselves if self-regulation has been integrated. Absolutely, Brita. The client will treat themselves the way they'll be treated, and it'll be unconscious. And we're telling them to go treat themselves well, and they have no capacity, no understanding of how to even look after themselves. Can we see why this is part of the pre-therapeutic process and not therapy? If you've got a client who can't be in their body, is petrified of what's in their body because of all of this wrapping, and treats themselves very poorly, shames themselves, annihilate themselves, believes that they don't deserve healing, they don't deserve holding, they don't deserve support, they don't deserve. You got these three components that come together, you've got emotional lockout. You've got a huge incapacity. And you've got a very dysregulated nervous system as a result of those three. So when we talk about how a client self-regulates, what we're fundamentally hearing is what the client is doing to themselves. And that's on a continuum. It's on a spectrum, it's on a continuum. Even the client who's been wrapped in cotton wool will have an inner voice that comes from that experience of being wrapped in cotton wool. Has anybody ever heard it? What way do they treat themselves? What way do they talk to themselves? It's normally learned helplessness. It's normally I can't. It's normally I haven't got the capacity, because that is how the parent parented. So we can have people who've been wrapped in cotton wool, and we can have people who've been absolutely abandoned, And we can have nearly the similar experience of how the client treats themselves. And so this understanding of the clients and our world, we start to differentiate. Do you see the differentiation? Absolutely. Blaming ourselves, not seeing themselves as responsible for their own behavior. Clients that were over rescued, clients that weren't allowed to feel, clients that were wrapped in cotton wool. How do they treat themselves whenever difficult feeling comes up? They're incapacitated, they're helpless, they're looking for support. How do clients treat themselves when they have been abandoned? Normally clients that have been emotionally abandoned fill in the gaps as children, catastrophize, add 5 and 5 and make 25, and still do that as adults. Because it is the way that they understand these emotions. Yes, no self-esteem, no self-worth, no self-confidence. And this is the inner reality. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add one more voice. So I know if the idea of self-regulation or self-soothing is a very, very, very tiny in this piece, a very tiny mention. There's much more depth and width to it. But all that I wanted to do for this course that we're on is I want you to see the component parts of what creates emotional lockdown. When you see the component parts, then you can work with each component part to build extra capacity in the system. Does that make sense? So what we're working with here is we're working with disunity. We're working with disunity possibly because of wrapping and all the different types of wrapping. And then we're working with a lack of self-regulation or a very specific way to regulate, which is either to annihilate, to catastrophize, to blame, to shame, to shut down, to feel inferior, whatever it is. Now, they're the 3 main pieces. And then there's a 4th piece, a wee sneaky 4th piece. And the sneaky 4th piece can put a client off altogether. And the 4th piece is what I call the negotiations of self. Now, in any change process, the organism is trying to hold on to the structure of what it knows. So the human condition as an organism is trying to hold on to maintaining the structure because it knows that it can get its needs met. It knows how to operate within that structure. So when change comes, or the possibility of change comes, then there is a question about that change. There's a question within the organism that will automatically come. And the question is, who will I become and what will become of me? If I let this go, if I move past this, if I am not that person, if I undo this, if I move towards this, if I let go of what I fundamentally know, I'm so comfortable in berating myself. That's how I treat myself. I'm comfortable. I know it. I don't know how to be anything else. So what will happen? What will happen? Who will I become and what will become of me? Who will I become and what will become of me is the voice. Now I ask you, right? I ask you to have a wee think about everything that we've brought together. You know, I really went into detail yesterday in psychosomatic unity and wrapping. And these last 2 pieces, whilst I've given very little, verbal attention to it, they're as equally as important. And it looks like this visually. Can you see that? You see that? Is that all right, Armando? This is what we're looking at. This is what we're looking at inside the human condition. These are the competing forces. And as therapists and as clients, sometimes we have our eye on the prize. Sometimes we have our eye on the, the core issue, the core wound, the big job, the big trauma. Can you see visually what is going on in the client? Can you see why they pull back? Can you see why they can't? Do you see why they shut down? Do you see why the nervous system doesn't have the capacity? Do you see why the system won't allow it? Do you see why the DNA? Can everybody see that? Yeah. So there we have it visually. Now I want you to listen to this for me, all right? So we're going to do a wee tiny exercise. I'm going to be a client and I'm going to try and tell you the story of how I feel. And I'm going to try my best to tell you the story. Now, we've just had the visual exercise. We're going to have an auditory exercise. So if anybody has anything going on in the background, you might want to just pay attention to this. So we have 4 people that represent the 4 component parts, visual or an auditory representation of the 4 component parts of what I just showed you visually. I'm representing the client and I want you to try and listen to what I'm saying. So I want you to try and listen to what I'm telling you, what I'm trying to get across to you. All right. So if our 4 component parts are all ready, you can unmute yourself. And do you want to unmute yourself? Just double check everybody's unmuted. Yeah, everybody's unmuted. Okay, so let's go. 1, 2, 3, go. I just want to.
You're just weak. You're just weak and pathetic. You're just weak and pathetic. That's all you are. You're just weak. You're just pathetic. You're just weak and you're pathetic. You're weak and you're pathetic.
What will you become of you?
Just weak and you're pathetic. You're just weak. You're pathetic. You're weak and you're pathetic.
Become of you?
You're just weak.
Become of you, and who will you become?
Thank you. That's the noise in the client's head. And we're asking them, could you hear me at all? And I wasn't trying to lower my voice. That's the noise in the client's head. You have the visual representation, you have the understanding of it. I could nearly cry, I think, because I know what it's like. We all know what it's like. We've experienced it. That's the noise that goes on, and we're asking clients to move beyond it. Is it any wonder they're exhausted? Is it any wonder we're exhausted? Is it any wonder we're thinking, what are we hearing? Are we hearing core issues? Are we hearing nervous systems active? What are we listening to here? Because that's the experience. Let me know in the chat what that felt like to you. What did that feel like to you? Because that's the experience. We're not playing games here. This isn't, chaos. Chaos, Vicky. Chaos, Armandi. Absolute chaos. Overwhelming, Helen. Absolutely. Overwhelming. Overwhelming to listen to, wasn't it? As a processor, and overwhelming to listen to. Frustrated that you couldn't hear and understand. Isn't that amazing? You trying to really listen to me, and there's all of this going on, because the reality of it is the client is trying to communicate something, and there's this thought and there's that thought and there's this process and there's that process and there's that, and they're trying to communicate it all, and we're bouncing around with them. Pain and sadness in my chest. I thought I was going to cry at one stage. I genuinely felt overwhelmed, genuinely felt the tightness in my chest. Unnerving, wasn't it, Siobhan? And so now do we have an understanding of why we don't, not they, because they're not a they, they're a we are a we, we're all clients, doesn't matter. Panic, fairly, yeah. Do we have an understanding of what the internalized experience is? Out of control, Brita, yeah. So our job from here on in is to be able to listen with more accuracy, or to understand with more precision what is happening here. That graphic, I will make sure if anybody wants it, Leona's going to kill me, Leona, when they signed up, can we put that graphic there? Hold on, do I see, Leona?
I can send it out tomorrow on email.
Can you?
I'll put it, I'll try and put it under the automated email that comes out with the replay tomorrow.
Right. So see that graphic there? I think that might be one of the most helpful graphics that you could have, because it has all of it in it, and you'll be able to spot it and you'll be able to help it. Is that helpful there, that one for you? Because there's no point putting it on the Teachable course, is it? No.
No,
Okay.
no point in putting it on there. Now they might not be able to, you might not be able to download it and print it off when it comes out in the automated email, but at least you'll have a graphic there that you can copy down yourselves, if that makes sense.
And know what we'll do as well, we'll pop it into the group, the email, the Facebook group, for anybody that wants it in the Facebook group, so they can have it.
Yeah, under the professional academy. I think most of you guys are already on it anyway, so I'll pop it on there too.
Brilliant. Okay. So while we're here, I just want to take you through that again. We spent a lot of time on the first night in this unity. We talked about the component parts of that. This unity is a practice in and of itself. It's a system in and of itself. The three component parts of that are introspection and metacognition and stage of process. They each have their own skill. So you can, what I'm hoping that this will do for you is it'll open you up to the understanding for it. What we teach inside the course is the specific skill of reunifying. What we teach inside the course is specific skill of building metacognition, building introspection, all of the facets of introspection that we talked about yesterday. And what we also do is we build a great assessment around that, so that you have a very good way, just a flip chart way of assessing a client that comes in. We then, more importantly, spend about 3 weeks in the wrapping and unwrapping process. That becomes the focus, because we understand that in the wrapping process, you learn a lot of unity skills. So in the unity part, what we teach is, we teach not only unity, but regulation, to help the client have more capacity. Now, a lot of these might have regulation work already done, which is brilliant. We just reaffirm that, but we fundamentally teach the unity. Then we teach the wrapping and unwrapping as a process. Unwrapping and wrapping as a process is the key focus of the work that we do. We teach the regulation work, and then we teach the negotiations itself as a bonus. Those pieces of the puzzle added together become the framework for unlocking. There is nothing else that has to be done to unlock other than those parts of the puzzle, and we make sure that the nervous system is. Don't you just love real life and dogs in the middle of it all? Can you hear my dog going crazy in the background? 2 seconds. So these are the component parts of what it takes to create emotional deepening in the client. I am hoping that we've given you enough to get going and to get started. If anybody is wanting to go deeper, then the course is a 6 to 7 week course. We say 6 to 7 because we will go at your pace. We collectively come together. We teach the modules as I just relayed them there, but we teach them in a very particular way. we teach them through you. So we take you on a journey of unity. We take you on a journey of introspection. We take you on a journey. Because when you have that integrated, then the skill is so much easier. Does that make sense to you? So the course is taught exactly as the modules have been laid out: unity module, wrapping module, self-regulation module, and then negotiations of self. And we take 2 to 3 weeks for each module. And the reason that we do that is that we teach the theory, then we teach the integration, and then we do the skill. So that you're getting this from 3 angles. Why do we teach like that? Why do I teach like that? I teach like that because I know what you have integrated will become an automatic skill. I know what you know in you will become an automatic skill for the client. I know when you know it in you, you'll be able to spot it in seconds in a client. It's a seamless integration of the material and the skill so that you have it, you know it, and you become it. And it's not something you come back to in memory. It's the way we teach all our courses. It's the way we teach it. So your current reality is that you are working with clients and they're frustrated because they can't deepen. Your current reality is that clients are finding it difficult to get past and are in emotional lockdown. Your current reality is that, and that you have skill. I am hoping that I have affected your current reality in these 2 days. I am hoping that I have genuinely made a dent in that current reality. And I hope that we've made a dent, as seen Sophie's from today. We've already made a dent in the awareness. Where I want to move you to, where I want you to be, is I want you to be understanding not only the concepts, but have the skill, have the integration, and have the awareness and knowledge to be able to work with a client so that you're not exhausted, they're not exhausted, and they have built a capacity within them that they can dictate how far and fast they go, in what order, that they're not being pushed, they're not being cajoled, they're not being enticed, they're not being scared, that there is a process in which there is a softening process of deepening that happens, and it happens quite naturally, like beyond naturally, and that this is an easier process for you to work with clients, and it's an easier process for you internally. So I want to, hopefully I've moved you from your current reality to your new reality, where this understanding will open up your practice. And if you want to take the course, then it'll move you again beyond where we are today. So we'll move you to that new understanding, both within yourself and within your client base. That is my invite after the 2 days together. I'll show you some of the details of the course. The course is, when are we starting, Leona?
27th of September is the first theory day.
Brilliant. So we'll run this one from September, which probably takes up, give yourself about 7, it says 6 weeks, but it's always more. Give yourself about 76 weeks. After September, there's another date. So we will have 2 dates this year, September and another date. I teach it live, so it's not a pre-recorded course. So you show up live with me. It's on a Wednesday evening at 3 o'clock, I think. So I'm just trying to think, is there anything else? No, I teach it live. It's about 7 to 8 weeks. There'll be 2 cohorts in this year, September, and then a later date. If you want, I'll show you the pricing and all of the details in that in a wee minute. Absolutely, Rhonda, there's no problem on holidays. And if you're a student, somebody says they're a student, I would recommend you do it before you finish your degree, because you can integrate it. Liz, you're in that place, aren't you? Where in that place?
Yeah, absolutely. I just replied to Leslie there. Highly recommend. I did it. I'm still a student. I'm in fourth year, but yeah, I did it nearly 2 years ago now. It's huge help personally and when you start seeing clients. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. So if anybody, any questions or anything to add, the forum is yours. Anybody that wants to add any value, anybody that's done the course that wants to, because it's easy for me to say, you know, buy my stuff. I'm hugely passionate about it. I think it's the precursor to any therapeutic work that you'll ever do, no matter what your modality is. I've obviously designed it. I'm obviously behind it. I'm going to tell you it's wonderful, but there's many people here that are have done it and are continuing to practice.
Yeah. So I'm happy to share. I did the course and I don't think I understood, even though I did this introduction course, the depth and how personal it was, and the value in it really comes from the individuals taking part, really sharing deeply of their own selves, and in doing that, the learning was vast. So I can't recommend it highly enough. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And I promise they're not paid to say this today. There's been no money.
Hi, Shauna.
Yeah, who's that? Sorry. Who's that?
Hi, it's me, Billy.
Holly, sorry, I couldn't see you there, darling. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Sorry, no, I just wanted to share. Could you hear me okay? It's a bit broken, is it?
Here you know.
Oh, cool, cool. Just to say that, you know, I was person-centered trained, and I'm just thinking of a particular client at the minute who would has presented or grief issues and being quite dissociated. And I just feel if I had stayed in the world of person-centered, we'd have stayed with the grief and the dissociation and the grief and the dissociation forever and never really got anywhere. So with the mastery, with the unwrapping, actually there's just so much shaming has gone on, the experience of feeling such difficulty. We don't even look at the grief as such. It's shaming of feelings. The introspection is I'm crazy, manic, mental. It's also resulted in loss of love and connection. So it's a really unsafe place to be. It's just a vagal shutdown. So really without the skill of unwrapping, and even when we name it, the client will receive the education of knowing what it is as, God, I'm so stupid for not knowing it. That's how kind of deep the stupid piece is. And we lift that piece up and we say, well, how would you? And look at our culture and look what we do. But just showing that we've lifted the layers with the wrapping, the shift in a client really in about 25 weeks. And this would have been someone who just went from counsellor to counsellor and let's just talk about your grief. And I'm nearly unsolvable was the presentation. So it's just quite incredible the relationship that this client is starting to have with their own emotions now, given this knowledge and the awareness. And
Brilliant.
yeah, so I just think it's, and even if you're going to leave the therapy and go work in Tesco, it'll still help with your own life. That's what I always say with yourself.
And I love that. It's about the relationship we have with our emotions, which leads us to deepening under the emotions. But you can't deepen under the emotions without the relationship being clean and clear of all of the stuff that we're holding. So thank you for that. All right. If anybody can it work with autistic clients around, it depends on the level of they have on the spectrum. It depends on their capacity. And it depends on the capacity that they have for introspection. Inside the autism, depends on the capacity that they have for communication. So you know that if you're working with autism, there's on that spectrum, there's a huge variety of need and a huge variety of capacity. So it would depend on the capacity. But at the lower end of that spectrum, yes. Thank you, Armandale. It'll give you more peace about your work. Brilliant, brilliant, Armandi. Thank you so much. Anybody else, any questions about that? Anything that they want clarified? You know what you need? We need to talk about the price. Never mind anything else. See, this is what happens to me. I get carried away. I'll show you the modules and I'll show you everything else, and we'll show you so that, what do we see? Okay, so here we are. Here's the program. It says a 6-week program, but it's a wee bit more than that. So if you're thinking about it, give yourself about 7 to 8 weeks to complete it. You are going to be helping your client regulate and self-soothe, and you're going to be developing that mind-body connection so that they can deepen. It works over 3 specific modules. I deliver it over Zoom. Now, this is the stuff that I didn't talk about. We have our own academy. So you have access to the academy. Inside that academy, all the videos, all of the learning that is recorded is in the academy. So if you were off for a week, you can go back and watch the video with your cohort, so you don't miss a beat. Inside the academy, you have also all the documentations. So I showed you some documentation in this introduction course, but you have the full gamut of material available to you, and it's all downloadable and it's all there. It's every Wednesday afternoon, and all lectures are recorded. The modules are 3 very basic modules, just exactly as I'd introduced them. And there are all live lectures. There's practical skill as well for implementing it. There's all the training resources, all of that. You have a private Facebook group. All of these guys that are, not all of them, some of the guys that are here are in that Facebook group, and I'll help you. And there's 3 bonus materials. And here they are: navigating the healing process, negotiations of self, and the negotiations of pain. It's worth 17 CPD points. It has been certified as a CPD program. Do you see the way I need these graphics to keep me on track, or else I would just be saying right night everybody away and get a cup of tea. And so here is all the summary. Leona, who's here tonight, is your support on the course. So if, like, for example, something happens, say something happened at home and you couldn't complete it, you just put on to the next cohort. You don't lose it. You never lose it. So no matter what's going on, if you started the course and got halfway through it and couldn't finish it, then our job is to get you supported enough to get through the course. And even if it's next year, it's next year. The many people that have started it and then come back to it a year later. The thing about it as well is it's lifetime access. You'll always have access to your cohort. If I update it in any way, you get access to that too. And it's not, you don't have to pay to get access, or you don't have to pay to get lifetime access. It's all part of it. It's all the same. So hopefully I have, Leonie, you let me know if I've left anything out. And there is the investment. It's £350. Is there a 2-pay or anything, Leon? I don't know if we talked about this.
Yes, there's a 2-pay as well. The sterling 2-pay is 187 for 2 months. US dollars is 234, and in euro that would be 217, and that's all worked out at today's rate. That's just how we work.
Right. So that's the investment. The course, it's not that expensive for what it is. The reason it's not expensive isn't a reflection on the quality, I can tell you that. The reason that it's that price is because I am trying to get as many people trained in it as I possibly can, so that we can make a real dent, so that can make a real difference in people getting actually access to the help that they need. But I can tell you, it's not a reflection of the work or the intensity of the program. Even though it is everything that I have said, it's a low entry price, a low barrier to entry in order to get as many people on it as we can. And there is a 2-pay if it is difficult. If anybody has a difficulty with the 2-pay, let us know. We can help under individual circumstances. So the way that it works is in the email tomorrow, you'll get an email tonight. You might get a link if you want to join the course. If you have any questions whatsoever, if you need anything clarified in any way, even content, then just email us. and we will get right back to you. Leona will be your point of contact. If you take the course, Leona will be the point of contact. That's a great question, Vicky. I don't know. Actually,
Yeah.
how does CPD points translate the US?
I've
Armand?
actually just been looking at that on Google myself. Vicky, like I say, I'm Googling it at the minute, but I will look into that completely for you tomorrow and get back to you. At the minute, is what I've got up is that it's saying yes, it's definitely recognised. CPD points are recognised in the US, but I will look into it thoroughly for you tomorrow.
Something that we never talked about, Armandi. I've never thought about it, never thought about the transfer of it. Okay. So anybody,
Good to figure out.
go ahead, Armandi, sorry, what was that?
Good to figure out. I'd also, and I can look into this too. I'm curious if any of these hours count toward an International Coaching Federation.
Yeah, which is another good question as well. Okay, I hope have I served you well. That's all that matters. Never mind courses and prices and all of that. If I've served you well, then you'll serve your clients well. End of story. Job done. I hope I have introduced you to a new world of thinking. I hope I have reignited your passion for what you're doing, because we're all doing great jobs, an amazing job. I hope to see in the inside of the course, if I'm honest. I hope we can take this to another level. And if you have any questions whatsoever, please let us know. I'm only too happy to help. We are only too happy to help. I'm great. I'll be delighted to see you, Sophie, after your good work last week. So hopefully the introduction course was of service to you, and I hope to see you at the other side. Go away and have a big cup of tea. And if it wasn't Tuesday night, I might have a glass of wine, but it's Tuesday night, so I'm going to stay on the tea and just check if there's any other questions. And if not, then we will see where we are. Brilliant. Okay. All right. Take care, everybody. See you all soon. Thanks a million. Thanks, everybody on Facebook. See you soon. Thanks. Brilliant, Verity. Thank you so much. Thanks, Rhonda. Thanks to all the guys. It was so helpful. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks, Helen. Thanks, Karen. Thanks, everybody.